Hi, Rick. I'm so excited. Me and all my parts are excited about this interview and excited mostly because I didn't think I would come across another financial advisor who also understands internal family systems. Not only understands internal family systems, you've got a level one, level two, a level three, which is not an easy feat. It takes several hours of client work to get there. And everything about you is very impressive, but I would love if you could introduce yourself in two or three sentences. I mean, you've written 4 books, you're a certified financial, you've got so many letters behind your name. But yeah, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm kind of a normal guy from the middle of America that is pretty curious about finance and psychology. So my path started a long time ago along that, and more recently I've become a certified financial therapist and a certified IFS practitioner. And I'm kind of playing with joining those two things to really help people understand when they're stuck around making good financial decisions for themselves.
Mm. And what was it about IFS? How did you, could you describe a little bit the journey to IFS?
Yeah. I got into IFS by mistake. I had shown up at a place called Esselen to do a week with Bessel van der Kolk.
Uh-huh.
And I'd had a lot of group psychotherapy and especially psychodrama. Right. And that's kind of a little bit of his brand. But he was doing a weekend right before that week with some guy I didn't know, some Schwartz guy. So I thought, okay, I'll show up and see what they have to say. And it was just a fascinating presentation, and especially a presentation of Dick Schwartz's IFS, which I had never heard of, and the areas that they disagreed. And I became so interested by the end of the weekend that I said, I know what Bessel's doing, but I have no clue what this Schwartz guy is doing. So I asked to switch because he was then teaching a week. So I switched into the IFS program. And on the second day, he would do a demo every day. And on the second day, he throws out his cards and it goes from ace of spades down. And I drew the ace of spades. Wow. So on the second day, I did this IFS session with Dick Schwartz. And that was the first IFS session I ever did in my life. And what was interesting is I had a real problem in group therapy ever getting to my tears, ever getting to my sadness, maybe on a rare occasion. But in this demo, I sobbed for 30 minutes in front of 35, mostly therapists. And I am not a licensed therapist. I don't have a master's degree in that. And it was at that moment I decided there was something to this IFS stuff. So there was a lady there that I was drawn to that is an IFS practitioner. And I signed up with her for weekly sessions. And that was about 5 years ago. And I'm still going. Wow. So there was no professional intention on my part to do anything with this professionally until I finally took a training in London. That's my IFS home, and training is from the UK. And there was 3 one-week training sessions. It was on the 3rd week of that training session in July of 20 that it hit me. This could be combined with financial therapy, maybe. So that's a little bit of the process. But for me, I really wanted to keep it close for a long time. Like, I didn't even want to take any training or read too many books because I didn't want to really see the person behind the curtain. That would be a U.S. terminology for the Wizard of Oz. the wizard behind the curtain pulling all the levers.
Right.
I just wanted to see if this thing worked, because I never got much from one-on-one therapy. I did a lot from group, but not one-on-one. But this was different. So it worked for me, and I actually have taken some evaluations that scientifically show the shift in my system, in my parts, and it's been some incredible shifts, especially with the inner critic. My inner critic has way relaxed. Wow. So, yeah, I could go on and on, but
wow, that is such an incredible story, though, that you got to work with the Grand Master himself, Dr. Richard Schwartz. That's quite cool.
Yeah, and then I've taken 4 more weeks from him, and I've drawn the demo card 3 out of the 4 times.
Wow.
So I guess I'm a lucky IFS guy, right?
Yeah. One of my paths just reminded me that a lot of people watching might not know what internal family systems is. So should we quickly give them, maybe you could give them what internal family systems is?
Yeah, that's a tall order. Basically, IFS is taking family systems theory. And family systems theory says there's no black sheep of the family. There's no designated patient. There's not, if we could solve this person's problem, we would all be okay. It's the theory that all of us are contributing in this organization, in this family, to all the dynamics, if you wanted to use the word dysfunctional, that are producing what can be identified by the family as the problem. So we're taking that and applying it internally. And we're saying the same thing about these parts of ourselves. So it comes from anytime you've ever said, whether a part of me wants to do this and a part of me wants to do that, that's IFS talk. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes, and even in therapy, we try to get rid of parts. We try to say, yeah, the part of me that's addictive, the part of me that's overspending, I want to get rid of that part. That's the bad part. And it's understanding there are no bad parts, that all parts have good intentions. The outcome of their good intentions may not be serving us well today, but they probably were back in childhood, survival techniques. So it's just learning to work with those parts. And I like to say IFS, an IFS practitioner or therapist, really is just helping the client interview themselves, interview and get to know their parts. And there's also the position in IFS that all of us have a self, who we really are, that can get covered up by all these parts. And once we can get these parts to step back, we have this inbred, internal wisdom and knowledge that we really know what to do to help our systems come into equilibrium.
Yeah. And having experienced IFS myself, I think what I love about it is that it is in the here and now. Your traditional therapy, a lot of psychotherapy, gets you to talk about things that happened in the past, which is perfectly fine. But the crying that you experienced, and the healing that came with it, or the transformation, or whatever the word you want to say, is in the here and now. And you can see it, you can see the effects of working with your parts quite rapidly. And the non-pathologizing, the non-shaming of any parts, the reminder that all parts are welcome, even angry parts and spiteful parts and shaming parts and critical parts. To me, that was so beautiful because I like the inclusivity of it. And then I was reading Dr. Richard Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts, which is a very good book. And I also love that he talks about the systems in which we live in, like racist paths and narcissistic paths, that we have. These are legacy burdens. And it's just fascinating. I was curious about how, because I have no idea, how does financial therapy help a client? I can understand normal therapy, but financial therapy.
Yeah, that's a big question too. Financial therapy is really broad in that we kind of know what therapy is, right? So we know what IFS therapy has no agenda. It's just working with you where you are, what's coming up. Let's talk to the parts. So I think we have an idea. There's all different types of modalities of therapy, narrative therapy, solution-based therapy, etc. I think we can kind of understand what financial planning is.
Yeah.
But I will say what it's not. Selling any investment is not financial planning, even though in the U.S., most people who say that I'm a financial planner are simply selling an investment. Financial planning is very broad. It covers all aspects of your financial life: insurance, estate, cash flow, what you think, feel, and believe about money. I mean, all of this. So that's financial planning. Now we marry the two. Financial therapy, which is specifically being aware of therapeutic tools, doing therapy specifically around financial stuckness or financial blocks. So I like to say the person that's best suited for financial therapy is anybody who's stuck, which includes a lot of people. Anybody who's tried to kind of strong arm financial behavior, but it hasn't worked. Or tried to use knowledge. Okay, I just need to learn more. And we learn more about budgeting or investments or whatever it is, and our behavior doesn't change. Well, there's something deeper going on. And those would be parts that have beliefs that are really trying to do good things for the system, but the outcome today is different, and it's not helpful. Yeah. So it's a broad part, because when I'm working with a financial therapy client, there'll be some sessions that we're really focused on the numbers, and other sessions where we do parts work where we're really focused on the therapy with the parts. And all of it is okay. I mean, all of it is financial therapy. And that's just my brand of financial therapy. Yeah. There's other financial therapists. I mean, at this very moment, I don't know of another financial therapist that is using IFS. So this is like, I'm a one-off at the moment. Yeah. But other financial therapists use cognitive behavioral theory, like I said, narrative theory. They all have their modalities. Mm-hmm. And some are more coaches. Some are just kind of helping with the communication because they're aware of the emotional part. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty much the Wild West at the moment. There's only 27 people in the world that are certified as financial therapists. There's 120 in the queue. But this will become more of a thing as time goes on. I mean, you can't even get a degree in financial therapy right now. You can get a certificate in the U.S. From Kansas State, but you can't even get a degree yet. But someday.
Wow. So you really are the leader of the pack in the Wild Wild West. That's very cool. One of 27. That's a really small.
I may be the leader of myself. Although I just did a talk to the Financial Therapy Association on what I'm calling IFS informed financial therapy. Mm-hmm. And the reception was really, really heartening and sweet. There's a lot of interest in this. Yeah. And I have a small financial therapy firm, and that's going to be our brand is IFS, Informed Financial Therapy. But getting somebody trained in IFS is really hard right now because there's so much demand that literally you've got to win the lottery to get into a training.
Yeah.
So I was so fortunate to be able to get into the UK classes when I did.
Yeah. And to do it in London, which is one of the greatest cities in the world.
Oh, London is like my second home. So.
Right. Oh, that's good. So what are some of the common problems of stuckness that you see?
You know, a person can be stuck around anything. They can, especially stuck around saving.
Yeah.
Or stuck around overspending. They can be stuck on who's going to be a custodian of our child if both of us are taken, where you have disagreements around that. You can be stuck on investing, where you need your investments to produce an income, but you're afraid to do anything but keep it in the bank. You can be stuck on being taking too much risk. It's just any behavior that you can identify as not being in your best interest, but it just keeps happening. You know, you are stuck. You are frozen. You're not like when your vehicle gets stuck in the mud, you know?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, if you think about that, we usually don't get unstuck ourselves. We've got to call for help.
Yeah.
And so in the U.S., calling for a tow truck, there's not much shame in that. There's a little bit shame if you were silly in the way you got stuck. But boy, when it comes to calling for help, if you are having financial issues, there seems to be great shame with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
That makes sense in the conditioning of the culture. And also polarizing parts, like one part wants to spend and one part wants to save, and one part wants to be disciplined and one part wants to be reckless. And I think IFS is helpful too. Yeah.
Yes, that's a huge thing in financial therapy with IFS is the things we run into most often are these polarized parts, as you just explained, and what you touched on before would be legacy burdens. Family burdens, which in my work, we call these burdens money scripts. It's like I love going to theater in London, and my wife is an actress, and she's given a script, right? She didn't write the script. It's given to her by somebody else. She learns it to the point she can deliver the lines and make it look spontaneous. And so that's how we learn our beliefs around money. They're given to us usually by our caregivers. We learn them, we watch what we hear, what we don't hear, what we see, what we don't see. And where we get into trouble is when the play changes from Hamlet to Julius Caesar, and we don't change the lines, all chaos happens, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we are when we're stuck as an adult, where it's kind of like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. But we don't know anything else than the original lines. So money scripts, that's a money script. It's a script we keep repeating over and over and over that eventually can bring us pain when the circumstance changes. So the key is trying to change those. In IFS, it's simply a money burden. A money script is a money burden. Yeah. So we learn what the beliefs are, the extreme money beliefs of these parts, and then we're going to the parts, learning a little bit more about how they got those beliefs, and then helping them unburden those, let go of those burdens, and begin a path toward coming into equilibrium.
And my next question is about the cost of financial therapy, because IFS is not cheap. Most good therapists cost, $200 an hour, $250 an hour. So if a client wanted to see a financial therapist but couldn't afford it, where would you suggest they start Is there something that they could start doing on their own?
Well, it's tough to do therapy on your own. And I can say that from a very knowledgeable place because I've tried to do that. Right. I don't want to go to a therapist. Yeah. Let me read myself to wholeness, right? And it's like the same thing of playing golf, Read 10 good golf books and you're ready to go out in the course and be a master, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So in the U.S., financial therapy is running between $150 and $300 an hour, somewhere in there. Now, I know in the UK that rates are a lot lower for therapy. 50 pounds an hour isn't off. And I even have a client recently said she's paying 90 pounds an hour in the UK for her IFS therapist, which is a lot of money. I'm told in the UK, I mean, that's about 125, 130 US, which would be maybe just a little bit low in the US. So I think the good news for UK folks is I think you could get this a little bit less. But the problem is if you have to go to the US to get it, then it's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. And I suppose with Zoom, you could even be in the UK and go to a therapist in Spain or somewhere else. That could be less expensive.
I mean, half of my clients are UK clients.
Right.
I don't have an in-person client.
Right.
I wouldn't know what to do with an in-person client. So Zoom is wonderful because it opens up the whole world, right?
Yeah.
So that is so helpful. But, I don't know what you do with financial planning, too. It's like so many people, hundreds of millions, billions of people need financial planning. And yet there's a cost to that. And it hasn't been made available to the masses yet. It's not something, many governments recognize legal services are important. Many governments recognize medical services are important. Many governments recognize and subsidize even therapy services. But financial planning is not been recognized as a crucial, a needed service to subsidize yet. I think someday that may happen. I think that's the only way we get it to the masses.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, yes, a person needs to have some money. And here's a real interesting thing, Cleona, about financial therapy. The longer it takes a person to get well, the more it costs. And I'm not talking about just the financial therapy. I'm talking about the ongoing hemorrhaging financially of whatever's going on, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I've been really interested in how can we speed up the process? Because unlike regular therapy, where it's hard to quantitatively judge the progress. With financial therapy, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
It shows up in dollars and cents, right?
Yeah.
So it's like one client I worked with, she was having a hard time saving. Well, several clients I worked with have done that. And we traced this back to when she was a kid. Money disappeared from her account that she'd saved. Money disappeared from her piggy bank. And they found out that her parents had been taking the money to help other kids. They went bankrupt at one time. And she learned, don't save money. Use it, because you'll never get to use it if you save it. Well, once she made that connection, it wasn't 2 weeks later. She says, oh, and by the way, saving isn't a problem anymore. I'm starting to save. I know it's not going to disappear, which is phenomenally fast progress.
Yeah.
Phenomenally fast. So, that's some of the experiences that I'm having with clients. I have another client, happens to be a UK client, that in 8 months, she ticked off 7 or 8 things that she has done that she's never done in her past. Started budgeting and started this and saving and all sorts of decisions, and just watched her her parts collaborate with one another. Parts that said, you don't deserve any of this money, give it all away. And other parts are like, well, we're going to starve to death then if we do that. And seemingly no give on any of these parts, and how they work together over a period of months to come up with a beautiful plan that all the parts were happy with.
Yeah. Wow. And as a financial planner, I can only imagine how good it must feel to have that kind of impact on a client, because it's not about the money bit, the external bit about the planning and putting it into investments, and that's the easy part. The emotional part is where all the stickiness is, and also getting clients to see the emotional part and the internal work that one has to do with money. So I can only imagine how gratifying it is to do this work, because I'm curious, how do you balance out the boundaries, the professional boundaries between, because like you said, you were sobbing for 30 minutes, and sometimes talking about money is very emotionally provocative. And then IFS on top, you're really vulnerable, your exiles are coming through. So how do you switch between the role of financial planner and financial therapist with the same client? I'm just curious.
So you're asking me to write my next white paper now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
I am in the process of understanding this as we speak.
Yeah.
Because it's huge. What can happen is, it's called transference in therapy, is that you could come on as the answer person, as the expert here financially, and then you go deal with the system, and you have somewhat of this potential power imbalance, right? Where there's parts that can say, oh, I want to please my financial therapist because they think I should do this or think I should do that. Yeah. And this is crucial. In fact, I was just recently asked, well, give me a example of where you've had to ask your financial parts to step back. So I had a financial planning client. In our first go through, I found out that she had borrowed $100,000 and invested it in cryptocurrency. My financial part just went into red alert. I mean, it dropped. It was flopping around on the floor, screaming, "Oh no!" And she had no other investments. And this isn't an investment according to my financial part. This is a speculation. So I had to ask my financial part to step back, because this was of no concern to her at the moment. This was not even what she was here to work on, right? So we spent many sessions working on other things. And this only came up in a most recent session, to where we started addressing possibilities, and a lot of the role of a financial therapist. And doing financial therapy is different from financial planning, but they can be joined. And that's what I'm working on right now. I have 3 financial planning clients that my staff is doing the planning for, and then I'm doing the financial therapy with them to see how does that inform the financial planning process, right? Mm-hmm. But in straight financial therapy that is not involved with financial planning, put that on the side. We did a lot of part sessions, and then it came up, and my job is to inform. My job is not to advise. And it's important to me right now that I check with parts and say, listen, check with this part and see if they'd like some more information. Most of the time the parts do, sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. So it's informing, it's being really clear that my financial part's giving me the information and hasn't taken over. And then at appropriate times I can give information and help the client have a conversation around that to where they need to go. Because still, parts don't know what they don't know. There's a part of financial therapy. There's a part in IFS of giving information. I've asked my practitioner many times, my part would like some information about this.
Mm-hmm.
I went 2 years with my parts believing when a part was unburdened, that it grew up, that it was automatically mature. And what we know is that most parts are very young. And when a part is unburdened, when a part comes into some equilibrium and understands, wow, those were burdens. Those were, I see why I believed them, but they're not true today. When they come into that, they don't necessarily grow up right away. They still can be sensitive to those. Anyway, it took me 2 years to get that bit of information. So information is really important. So it's a real balance. It's a real balance.
Yeah. It's a real balance. And it's lovely to have a financial planner who's, trauma informed, because this is something that many people are talking about, especially now during the pandemic. It seems there's an opening of greater emotional awareness and understanding of the fact that trauma affects us not just as humans, but also, there are legacy burdens that we hold in how we collectively harm each other and continue to do so. And so the trauma-informed lens is so helpful.
And using IFS now, all of my clients are familiar with IFS. That's the one thing I've set up while I'm beta testing this, right?
Right.
They're mostly IFS therapists. I have some clients that have done a lot of IFS. So we can dive right into the parts talk, meaning tell me about the part of you, the part of that. Okay, we have this common way of communicating.
Yeah.
And my clients have found that so helpful to be able to talk in parts when I'm talking about the financial planning specifics and the money stuff. Well, how's this part responding to that? And we can kind of it's not an official part session, but it's parts talk around what's going on.
Yeah.
And then when we run into a part that's really screaming, we can switch and say, okay, let's do some parts work on that. So it changes the whole dynamic for me of the engagement. It's just so far I'm enjoying it. I'm probably enjoying it more than my clients are.
I wanted to ask you, because I didn't do an IFS level 1. I did a 16-week course with Derek Scott in Canada on Zoom. And I noticed how often I'm not present in client meetings because I have timekeeper parts, when like you have a certain agenda and you have certain things to ask and questions, and sometimes you go off piste, and then the timekeeper part comes in, or other parts that distract me. And just being able to have that internal conversation to say, hey, I hear you. Could you please step back? Because right now I'm focusing on this. That enables me to be in self, and I'm so much more present, having done just a little 16-week course. So I'm curious about how has the shift been for you pre-IFS and being a financial advisor with greater access to self?
Yeah, well, you described it beautifully, right? All sorts of traditions and things that we learn. The real key of it is learning to be present, right?
Yeah.
And that's what being in self or self-led is in IFS. It's being present. The Enneagram, which maybe some of your viewers or listeners know about, is really about how to become present. So IFS is a wonderful methodology, and what that really means to become present. So in the trainings I've done, like I've just done a training called IFIO, Intimacy from the Inside Out, and it's using IFS with couples. And 50% of that training is focusing on what's coming up for the therapist. It's huge. It's just huge. So that's the importance. I'm telling any financial therapist that wants to adapt IFS, the first thing to do is go get their own therapist, IFS therapist. 50% of what I use, maybe more, in every session I learned doing my own therapy. I was talking to, I have a supervisor and I still have my therapist, and I was talking to both of them like so many times something comes up in a session. And if all I had was the training, I'd be going, OMG. Where do I go? Yeah. And so I have that little confused therapist part that comes up. And I can say, it's okay. We've been here ourselves. We had this same issue, and here's how my practitioner handled it or what she did. So I tell financial planners, all over the world that the best thing they can do is get their own financial planner and become a client. This is in spades. It's like a non-negotiable. If a person's going to become a certified IFS practitioner, in my opinion, they have to do their own work.
Yeah. And even Dr. Richard Schwartz says that he still has weekly swaps and he still has paths that, so the work is never really done, is it? It's sort of an ongoing thing.
I watched him do a demo once.
Right.
It had to be the demo from hell. I mean, this particular person was so shut down, so protected, that I'm just sitting there going, give it up. This demo is over. This is going nowhere. And I don't know, 30, 40 minutes in, all of a sudden things broke loose. He ended up doing an unburdening, and then you do a debrief at the end. And I remember him going, and it is very humble, modest way. Well, I impressed myself. He said, I was batting back parts like crazy that were coming up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, even the master himself, of course, we all have parts. My practitioner found 29 parts in her 8 years of work on herself. And then just a couple of years ago, found a 30th part, which I might tell folks, I'm up to well over 50 and still counting. The average person has a lot of parts.
A lot of parts, yeah. Wow, this has been fascinating. Is there anything else you'd like to share? I will put details of your website and how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you in your office.
You asked the question, how can somebody that can't afford a therapist kind of be open, learn about financial therapy or whatnot? I just had this thought. I have a podcast called the Financial Therapy Podcast. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the money. And that could be a free way for somebody just to learn about various parts financially, and how the emotions are playing in. Yeah. That a person can do free.
Yeah, it's a good resource. I listen to it when I'm at the gym. And I also have your book, Conscious Finance, with Kathleen Fox. And I'm finding it very, very good. Yeah, so you've got 4 books. And you must have some serious workaholic path because...
I was just having this discussion yesterday. I was telling somebody I'm working 7 days a week. And they're like, oh, it was my men's group. And they said, well, Rick, is your workaholism coming back? Because I am. That's my drug of choice.
Yeah.
And I had to think, because I identify my workaholism as when I'm in pain and I'm trying to escape, to get away. And the problem is I'm just enjoying this so much. And here's the biggest problem. You're talking to me in my home. Ever since the pandemic hit, I didn't have an office in my home. I had to go 3 miles into work. No matter how bad the weather, if I wanted to work, I had to get there. And today, I have a better office in my home than at work. And so it's just here, and I can come in and have fun. Not 100% fun, but so yes, I do work a lot. Another resource that your viewers could have would be I have a website, financialawakenings.com, or it's a blog. Mm-hmm. And I put out a new article every Monday. Now, for your UK folks, sometimes I'm going to get into nitty-gritty financial topics on taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
But I try more than not to bring in emotional components.
Mm-hmm.
And then the podcast, quite frankly, is just a real expansion of those articles with a real focus on the emotional part.
Mm. Yeah. I'll definitely link those below. That's very helpful to know. And thank you so much, Rick. This has been so fascinating. Thank you for saying yes, because, you don't really know me, and I sent you a random email. So I'm so grateful that you said yes, because, you're a big deal.
Well, thank you, Cleona. And you're a big deal too, because you have more parts talk than 99.9% of all financial planners that I've ever talked with. You are really internalizing the IFS, even with the 16-week training. I think it's really exciting that you are so aware of so many components with this. Like I said, there can't be more than 12 financial planners in the world that get IFS. So there you go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love hearing that. That's wonderful. Have a lovely evening, and enjoy your work/play. And
okay.
Thank you for your time.
All right. It's been an absolute pleasure.